Good morning. Julie's story is an inspiring one, and I think anybody here in this audience should give her a round of applause for the courage it took her to get up and talk. It's a wonderful example of how owning the struggle with mental health makes it easier for the next people who come down the road. So I'm going to be talking to you today about the growing mental health needs in college. There are many, many, many theories about why this is happening. There's many theories about what we should do. But the important thing is to recognize that each of us bring a useful perspective to this conversation. You alone may not hold the answer, but your perspective can play a role in helping us find a solution. The first thing I want to talk about is how mental health is a continuum. If I can get my clicker to work here. There we go. So on one end of that continuum, you have healthy, normal functioning, which is most of us during most of our lives, if you think about your life over many, many, many years. On the other end of that continuum are folks who are ill. They may be experiencing severe and persistent symptoms that have a profound impact on their ability to function in the world. And in the middle, there we go, are people who are reacting and injured. And these are really, really normal experiences. These are common experiences that are, the consequences of them are reversible, but there's real distress experienced. And at times, you may have significant functional impairment. As you move from one end to the other, you move from informal sources of support and help, self-help, your own coping skills, your own resilience, your friends, your family, your support communities, to needing professional help. And there's no clear cut from one end to the other. Different people need different kinds of professional help at different points in their lives. The point here, mental health struggles are normal. You will experience them in your life as part of being a healthy human being. Just lost the projector here. All right, I'm going to roll with this, see what happens. Talking blind here. So let's talk from the perspective of students. Some of you are students out there? Anybody? Okay. So if there was a survey done a couple of years ago by the American College Health Association where they asked students, what have you experienced in the last 12 months? Okay. 51% of students said that they felt overwhelming anxiety in the last 12 months. 51% of students. That's normal, that's normative. 31% of students, or about 30% of students, said that they felt so depressed in the last 12 months they had difficulty getting out of bed. Okay, that's depression, that's normal. 51% and 30%. These are common experiences. Looks like we might be coming up here. Can you all see that? Okay, so much less common. Seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months, about 8%, and less than 1% of students said they attempted suicide in the last 12 months. So you go from the very, very common to the very uncommon, but even the least common thing up there, attempted suicide in the last 12 months, is the second leading cause of death of the college student age group. So even though it's very uncommon, it's critical that we understand it. So let's look at this from the perspective of counselors providing treatment every day. Here are the top 10 reasons that students come in seeking services to CAPS. Okay, so this is from the perspective of the counselor after they've had a chance to meet with a student, and they pick the top primary reason that they're there. Anxiety, depression, relationship stress, these are normal life experiences that people are seeking help, professional help for. The good news here is that mental health struggles are normative over the course of your lifetime. And many, many types of support and treatment are available, ranging from your friend next door to the book on the shelf to your support community that's unique to you. When you seek professional help on campus, the science shows that it's effective. It will help you feel better, as Julie has talked about. Different people need different amounts and different kinds, but it does work. Treatment also improves academic outcomes. Students are more likely to stay enrolled in college and persist on to graduation. So treatment is good for students, their individual struggles, but it's also good for the institution, because a student who's not healthy can't contribute in classes, can't be an engaged learner. okay? And may not be able to make the contribution and have the impact on this institution, the world, that they're capable of. Here's the bad news. When you go to seek professional help on a college and university campus, almost always the demand exceeds the supply, okay? When that happens, it leads to things like getting a screening instead of beginning treatment, going on a waiting list. Maybe there's only a limited number of people who can get treatment, and once you get treatment, there may be time limits about how long you can be seen because there's 200 people waiting behind you who want to get in for that professional help. This represents a lack of parity with healthcare, and the example I always use is if you went into your doctor and they said, hey, you have strep throat. Great, why don't you come back in 2 weeks? So you come back 2 weeks later, and they say, yeah, looks like you have strep throat. Why don't you come back in about a week and a half, and I'll give you a prescription. Come back about a week and a half later, now you're really, really sick, right? You may be dropping out of some classes, you may have missed some exams, right? They say, here's half a prescription. It's all we can give right now. And you leave. What happens? You might get over your strep throat, but you also might not. And this is the bad news of seeking professional treatment in higher education at most institutions. We are not alone in this. When you look at mental health across the United States of America in the 20 to 24 age group, this is the perspective of the country, okay? Mental health accounts for 1/3 of the disease burden of all health care, all lost life and all lost productivity in the country. Cancer, car accidents, right? Everything. So 30%. But SAMHSA a couple of years ago looked at all healthcare spending, and only about 7% of healthcare spending goes to mental health. That is a phenomenal gap between the impact, the need, and the spending that's put on it. So how do you meet this demand? How much professional help should there be on a campus? So now I'm talking from the perspective of an administrator, kind of a bird's eye view, or even those folks who look across many, many campuses. The International Association of Counseling Services, called IACS, provides these staffing ratio goals. These are aspirational ratios. 1 staff person to 1,000 students, or 1 staff person to 1,500 students, depending on the community that you live in, how many providers there are around that university. Okay, these are aspirational goals. When you look at these kinds of staffing ratios across the country, the Association of University and College Counseling Center Directors does an annual survey, and here's a graph where they break it down by institution size. Okay, and what you find really quickly, small institutions, less than 10,000 students, actually, on average, hit these ratios. They do pretty well. Once you exceed about 10,000 students, it gets pretty ugly pretty quick. So you end up with staffing ratios of 1 to 2,000, 1 to 2,500, 1 to 3,500. And there's a very clear thing that happens when you end up with a ratio like that. Now, talking from the perspective of an administrator in a counseling center, if you don't have enough resources, you have to make a decision. Do I cope with the person in front of me who's in a state of crisis, right? They were experiencing a normal developmental life crisis or a mental illness crisis. Do I cope with them right now, or do I treat a person for a long term so they get better? And the answer always is, I cope with the person in front of me right now. So we have to make this very unpleasant choice because there's not enough resources. So this is the dilemma of administrators in higher ed, specifically working with mental health services when there's not enough resources. Where would you draw the line if you were responsible for running that center? Who would you say no to, and who would you say yes to? Clicking away here. Whoop, there we go. Back up one. This is your university since 1947. Since 1965, Penn State University has grown by 250%. Okay? Ask yourself the question, have we kept up over that time with the staffing of mental health services on this campus? Okay? So what we're going to look at here, here's 2 points in time 30 years apart, 1984, 2014. 1984, CAPS had about, and now this is using the IACS staffing ratio, which has some unique qualities to it, but they had 12 staff according to this ratio. 30 years later, we have 22.4 staff according to the IACS ratio. So let's compare this to the 1 to 1,000 recommended staffing ratio or aspirational ratio for MIACs. We have a little bit of room to grow, right? So maybe that's too high to shoot for. Maybe we should aim for 1 to 1,500. Okay, we're doing a little bit better. But the point here is that we have a lot of room to grow. Even with the increase in the last year, which is fantastic and has enabled us to serve hundreds and hundreds of more students, there is still good room to grow. And it's important to understand Penn State is not at the bottom of the heap and we're not at the top of the heap in here. We are part of a country of institutions coping with this problem. So the questions that I would leave you with here, there we go. What is the role of the university in providing mental health services? What is the role of the students in the university for accessing or providing support or helping to make services happen? And how should this university that you live and work in meet the demand for mental health services? How do we fund those additional services? Services are expensive. Should we charge a student fee per semester? You might never use the service, but if you need it, it's there. Should we charge you per appointment? That might make some students less inclined to go get help, but would raise money. Should we try to charge health insurance? In theory, everybody has it, but believe it or not, many people do not. We see them every day. Or they have health insurance with a $5,000 deductible that you have to spend all of before you get services for free. So there's pros and cons to each of these, and my question to you is, how do we as a community decide to prioritize mental health treatment on this campus? Thanks.